All right, Miss Mays, we are live. Are you ready to kick this thing off?
I'm ready.
Let's do it.
KTTV, giving you what you need. Motivation, education unleashed. H-Town representing, we forever keep it rolling. Join the conversation with inspirational stories. Thought provoking, feel that energy. Kendrick Thomas aiming to lift the community. True indeed, tune in, come and see. Giving you what you need. KTTV, let's go. KTTV.
What to do, KTTV? This is KT, and I'm coming at you live with the season finale. Yes, summer is here, y'all. It's time to take the break of Education Unleashed. And on tonight's episode, I have the author, poet, and the coolest IT person you will probably ever meet. Author Belinda Mays. How you doing tonight, Miss Mays?
I'm good. I'm good. Love the intro, by the way.
Hey,
Love
thank
it.
you. I sure appreciate it when I tell you it took some fine tuning, but we finally arrived. We are here. Season finale. Been
Mm-hmm.
doing them for a while. I want to say thank you tonight for coming on, for taking some time out the schedule. I know you have a lot, wife, mom, Arthur, and so just thank you for taking some time out tonight to talk to us.
I'm honored. I'm happy to be here, especially on your season finale. You do great things, and I don't think people really appreciate how much time and effort it takes to put the show together. So, hey, thank you for having me on the season finale, and kudos to you.
Yeah, thank you. Look, when I tell you, not too long ago, because of the work, I was able to get an honorary doctorate. But it was you think about those first years of I was going through a tragedy and pain, and going through media was the only way I was able to really get it out. Had no idea about media. I'm a teacher, and so I spent that first year every weekend, like just learning and working until we get here years later where I can create like all of the flyers, be able to come on, program everything. So people don't understand. It's that real work out here.
It is. It is. Yeah, I know that behind the scenes work is a lot, and it takes dedication, commitment, and if you don't like what you're doing, you won't stick to it. So yeah, I can tell you like what you're doing.
Hey, now before we jump into anything, I always like to do a wellness check. So, how are you? And as you do all those things that I talked about in your intro, how are you finding time to decompress and take care of yourself?
So, when you're rambling off those things, I'm thinking in my mind, like, ooh, I'm tired just from thinking about all that because you're right. We have a lot of responsibility as a wife and as a mother. I hear the kids running around outside now. And so, and then my mother lives with us. So there's always a push and pull. There's always, something to do, right? So, but I feel like I am in a good headspace. This is my month. This is the month of June. It's special to me. It's my birthday month. It's Father's Day, and I have a passion for celebrating fathers. My father is no longer here, but I love to appreciate fathers, especially Black fathers, because I think there's this misconception out there that a lot of our Black fathers aren't involved. And I can tell you, since I've been here at A-Leave, I get joy in the morning when I'm bringing my kids to school and I see Black fathers standing at the bus stop with their kids. I
Mhm.
know how involved my husband is, even with his role here in A-Leaf. He's still an involved father. My father was involved with us and my brothers, cousins, everybody. So I just appreciate the month of June for so many reasons.
Most definitely, most definitely. And happy belated birthday again.
Thank you.
We're not gonna get into the age of anything. I'm pretty sure they already
39
know
again.
you're still in your
39 again.
20s. Hey, there we go. But no, happy belated birthday. I am still very sorry that you did not make it to be a cancer. But it is okay though. Look, we got Miss Robson in the building. Hey, Miss Robson, how you
Hey
doing?
there.
Okay,
Yes.
cool. Now getting into the work, right? You're thinking about the books. We talked a little bit about the cover, as I was telling you what the teacher said, but all of the books, especially the affirmations for the young ladies, for the boys. What inspired you to even get into children books? And how do you make sure that you're captivating, I guess, the children and adults?
So that's a good question, and I always tell people that I didn't start off to be a children's book author.
Mhm.
I actually was in the process of doing a speech contest with
Okay.
Toastmasters. I don't know if you've heard of Toastmasters,
Mhm.
but it's the leadership communication organization. And I joined Toastmasters because I was trying to network at my job. We had Toastmasters at work.
Mhm.
And I was a mentor of mine said, you should, if you really want to grow, you should jump into this speech contest. And it was a tall tale speech contest. And I wrote a tall tale called My Amazing Dad about my father
Mhm.
who could do anything and fix anything just like my father could. My father literally would ride around on bulk trash pickup day and find vacuums and things on the side of the road and take them home and fix it. So all my friends call him Mr. Fix It. So I wrote a tall tale story about my dad, and I won't spoil the book, but there is a protagonist who gets into a fight with this cockroach, and growing up I hated cockroaches.
Yeah.
I was so afraid, and so um that speech really did well. I won the tall tale contest. I went all the way up to, several levels past the club and the area and the district. And I had a friend at work. This is why it's so good to talk to people and tell people when you really appreciate them or like something. So she told me, she said, Belinda, you should turn that story into a book. It is so funny.
Mhm.
And at the time, I kind of brushed it off because, I'd had no desire to do that. But a year later, my dad passed away. And just to honor him and keep that story, because I actually got to perform it for my dad at my mom and dad's anniversary party before he passed away, and I remember how much he enjoyed it. And
Mhm.
so I said, I might do that. I might go ahead and publish this book just to honor my father, give it to his sisters. My dad has 8 sisters.
Oh, okay.
And we have a big family, so
Mhm.
nieces, nephews, cousins, just publish it so the family can have that, right?
Yeah.
And so that's exactly what I did. But turns out that I actually found my purpose by doing that,
Mhm.
because I started reading that story. And as I read that story and shared it with other people and they found joy in it, I just felt a connection to my dad.
Yeah.
And then it went a step further. So when I started going to story time at the libraries, I would see little kids of color and they enjoyed seeing me come to do story time. And then start looking at books around the library or in Barnes and Nobles, and there were not a lot of characters of color. And I said, you know what? I'm gonna start writing some more books, and I'm gonna put these characters of color on the covers. And so that really became, you know, my purpose. Really, I discovered my purpose throughout that whole experience.
Wow. Wow. Yeah. That like you say, just you never know.
No.
You never know. You just do things because, like I say, I had no idea. But somebody said, maybe you can get it out through just talking on the microphone. And so my first podcast was me and my friend on his porch, just with a microphone in between it. Just talking. And so,
Mhm.
but yeah, just taking that leap. And so I know you talked about going out, doing the story time. So give me one of your most memorable moments from doing the story time when just seeing the young black boys and girls get excited.
So I have to say, I've had a lot of different experiences with story time. I've had big crowds. I've had crowds that, I had maybe younger toddlers. And I remember one in particular in South Lake that it just seems very chaotic. So, but it was interesting that once you start telling the story, the kids kind of stop and they listen.
Yeah.
But I would have to say my most memorable one so far has to be when I went back to Beaumont to Blanchard Elementary. I was invited by my cousin who was an educator and at the time, and she was putting on a Black History program. And first of all, she reached out to me because they were doing reading through Black history. That was the theme. And she wanted me to come and do story time. And when I tell you, it just felt so good to go back to my hometown
Yeah.
and to be celebrated for Black History Month. It was just amazing. And we had an amazing time. I got to read to lots of different groups. I think from all the way from kinder to the 5th grade, they did rotations. We had a break and it was just amazing. They loved the stories. They were laughing when, wanted them to laugh. They were entertained. And so to me, that's one of the most memorable experience that I had. It's going back to my hometown.
Yeah, look, I love me some BMT. Uh, yeah, I had some friends. Man, I was down there, like I say, for a while. just enjoying myself. But yeah, I had to get back to Shreveport. But then I came back. But I, like I say,
Yeah.
while I was there, I was a Walmart worker.
Okay.
Just go. I was in the game. So just awesome work though. Just doing those. When I go and talk to kids, and it seems like once they realize you're human, because they think, I
Mhm.
don't know what they think about adults, but the young kids, if you come in and you're a speaker or something, they think you're a machine. And so then when they see that you're human, and they warm up to you, it's nothing like that feeling, right? And then just
Right,
keep
right.
going. So
Mhm.
now, as you do those, I think about the books, especially for young children, and what they're hearing is so important, regardless of the age. It's like if you tell them directly, they won't listen to you. But if you
Right.
kind of keep it going subconsciously in the back of their head, you may break the plane. So in your writing, how are you really intentional about creating those messages of empowerment and affirmations for young readers?
Yeah, so one of the things with me is all of my books are inspired by a part of my family, right? So the first book, My Amazing Dad was inspired by my dad, even though it's a tall tale, about him. Funny story, it was inspired by a real person, right? Or my father. And then, when I looked at, okay, writing that next book, because I told you I got inspired, I said, you know what, I want to write this next book. And so the next one I wanted to teach, but at the same time, it still has an element of my family in it because the 7 days with daddy, I wanted to teach those time concepts. Because at the time, our oldest daughter was having trouble with before and after. She just, wasn't grasping those things. So I wanted to put it in a story where, like you said, she doesn't know that she's learning, right? So it teaches the days of the week, but it's also a non-traditional story about mom going away on business travel and all the shenanigans that daddy and daughter get into, and it's based on real things that Dr. Mays and his baby used to do when I would go out of town. Only the things that daddy can do. So that's how I get inspired. But when I look at the positive words, the affirmation books, that came from a place of family too, because he was really big on making sure that we instilled affirmations in our kids, and we are in agreement with that. So when the girls were young, that's what we started doing. And that's when that book was written, when the girls were young and we were teaching them their affirmations. But I wanted to make sure that it had a biblical connection to it too. My mother, if anybody meets my mother is very, spiritual person, very, very connected to the Lord. And she's our prayer warrior. So I wanted to make sure that other parents, grandparents, teachers, whether that be, anybody, aunts, uncles, if they wanted to introduce the Bible to their kids, grandkids, nieces, nephews, neighbors, whoever, had a tool, because sometimes it may be a little awkward if you didn't grow up doing it,
Yeah,
but you want to introduce it, or even if you did in this day and age, trying to grab the kids' attention. So I wanted to write the affirmation series so that parents had a tool, and it's been well received. I actually had a couple of churches that have adopted the book, and they give it away for new parents.
mhm,
Because it's not a sit down story that you read at night. It's something you kind of revisit, and it can grow with the child. And so I was actually just thinking about that when before the podcast, that hey, this summer it's time to revisit it with the kids. It's not just read it once and forget it. You kind of revisit those things, because even us as adults, right? We have bad days and we need to be reminded of our affirmations sometimes. And so we don't need to teach our kids affirmations when they're 2 and 3 and then never talk about those affirmations or extend them or revisit them, as they're getting older and teenagers going through things. We want to keep building those affirmations in them.
most definitely, most definitely. And I think the more you compliment yourself, the more you do. The hardest thing it is ever is to accept compliments from other people, right?
Yes.
So go.
That's a good point, because I read something recently, even as an adult, like you said, one thing I used to have a habit of doing, somebody complimented me, I felt like I automatically had to compliment them back.
Mhm.
Sometimes you just say thank you.
Yeah,
Just breathe, just accept that. Say thank you. And I have learned to do that.
yeah. And the thing is, you do have to be intentional about doing it, because if you don't compliment them back, then you really downplaying the compliment in itself. Oh man, this is just something like
Right.
that. But just
Mm-hmm.
thank
Mm-hmm.
you. Oh,
Yeah.
that's hard.
Yep, just go ahead and soak that in, accept that. Just
Yeah.
go ahead and accept it. Mhm.
So now, like you said, teaching is very important, and so I want to let people know about the books, but a speaker as well.
Yes.
Yes, and so now, as a speaker, award-winning speaker, what techniques or strategies do you use to connect with diverse audiences? And then, how do you see that playing out in your writing as you do more books?
Yeah, so, my first passion was speaking. It
Mm,
has always been. I feel like I'm pretty conversational. I like to talk. I'm I grew up in a daycare setting. My mother is an educator and she owned a daycare. And I grew up with my mother making up stories, making up songs at the daycare. And it was entertainment. So when I had my kids, I immediately reverted back to that, right? So the entertainment, the music, all of those things that I saw my mother doing. And for me, when I'm speaking, a lot of times that's my style. I want to be entertaining. I want to be engaging. I don't want to lose my audience. So I'm always trying to think of the audience in mind. And so I think for me, when I'm writing my books, that's the same thing that I'm doing.
yeah,
I read the book out loud. When I first, even though My Amazing Dad was a speech that I won in a tall tale contest,
yeah,
I remember this is probably embarrassing to my kids, but I remember being outside, and if they had a group of friends, and I would call them over, I'd say, "Hey, y'all want to hear this story?" And I would read the story to them because I want to get the feedback. I want to see the reactions of what they do to see if I want to tweak words. So, I would practice that story over and over again on adults, neighbors, anybody who would listen before I published that book.
yeah.
And so for me, that's one of the things that I try to do is think of the different points of view because I really love as an author when people come back and say, "Oh, I read that book to my baby, and oh, we read this book, every night." Or that to me is empowering and what keeps me going because I know that the stories that our family has are resonating with other people.
Most definitely, most definitely. Look, we got Miss Robinson say happy belated birthday. Hey,
Thank you, Sarah Mindy.
and affirmations are powerful. Most definitely, they
Yeah.
are. And so now, thinking about the books, the writing, what does that process look like for you? Is it a few months, or do you kind of stretch it out, put it down, come back to it? How does your writing process go?
So, when you talked about how you're doing, so one of the things I had to do for my mental health, because, a lot of things have transpired within this past year.
Yeah,
And I had a goal of when I first started writing, I had a goal of 10 books in 10 years. And then I just threw it out there, just put a target out there to aspire to. But I have to tell you, balance, right?
yeah,
So right now, I'm getting back in balance where I can write because it was a point with moving. Moving is a very stressful time.
yeah,
You got to kind of put some things down, and so I have some projects that I am working on. But right now, it's all about getting acclimated to my city. It's all
yeah,
about taking care of myself, getting back into the gym, taking care of my health, getting the kids back
yeah.
into rotations, and I feel like we're there, right? So I feel
Okay.
like okay, it's time to start picking up some of those goals again and picking up this project that you may have had in the work. So I can tell you now, my writing process is very sporadic. I know sometimes people interview authors, they're like, "Oh, I write every day, every night at such and such o'clock." Yeah, that's not me.
Hey, hey, I'm gonna get
Yeah,
that.
that is not me. So I will full disclaimer, I cannot commit to a time schedule like
Mhm.
that. But there are times when I'm laying down or I see something and I say, "Oh, that would make a good book or a good line or
Yeah.
this," and I kind of write it down or I put it on my phone. So I have lots of unfinished business.
Mhm. Yeah.
But I do have a very sporadic schedule because life is just busy for the Mays
Mhm.
household. So I don't have, I would say, a firm commitments
Yeah.
or a dedicated writing process that I stick to daily.
Mhm.
But I will say, anytime I get inspired by something, it can even be a song. That I say, okay, I want my kids to know this, or I want this. I'll just write it down, and as I have time when I'm working on a project, that's when I'm gonna be committed. But right now, it was all about getting that mental
Yeah.
health back because I could not write with being so busy.
Mhm.
I like order and boxes all around the house. That wasn't gonna work.
Yeah. Yeah. You gotta have the feng shui right.
Oh yeah.
Hey, that's it. So now, how does your background in IT play a role in the creative, I guess, the creative juices as an author and a
Yeah.
speaker?
Yeah. So I think my role in IT has warped. I started
Mhm.
off, I don't know if anybody listening really knows the background on mainframe, but mainframe is old stuff, right?
Yeah.
But that's where I started. I started off in a mainframe as a mainframe programmer. And I have evolved to more project management, more change management. And I think that that has helped me though with the books because I look at each book as a project. And
Mm,
as a project manager, I'm going to set a schedule. I'm going to set this timeline, these tasks, these things that need to get done, and reach out to other stakeholders that need to be involved, whether that's my editor or my illustrator. And so I think for me, managing each book as a project, knowing okay, what does the end product look like? What do I want the audience to get out of this book? So I think that has helped me with the organization
mm.
and the follow through of getting it done. So I am very happy that I've been able to start and finish a couple of projects, and I have more on the way that I need to start and finish. And
Hey,
that's why I said, I need to get in that project zone right when I'm ready to actually start the project. But if my mental is not there, it's so many things going on. I just have to wait.
mhm. But that's how it be when it's coming from the heart. You got to get into that right place so you can be able to pour out.
Yep.
Most definitely, I understand totally where you coming from. Now, usually, I don't tell people this a lot, but I am a published poet.
All
You
right
know, it was
now.
back in third grade though. It was in third grade,
That's all
but we
right
had a
though. That's
book
all right.
and it did get published in the Seedless
Yeah.
book. And so I think about your poetry. So I know you talked about how you approach the books, but getting into some of the poetry, is it a different approach?
So, yes and no.
Mhm.
So a lot of times with the poetry is also a feeling, right?
Yeah,
And I remember my first poem. It was so pointy. It was like, I know my mom loves me. She bought me new glasses so I can see. I think I was around maybe that second or third grade
yeah,
too. And so it's funny though because it's what was going on at that time, right? I started wearing, glasses around that time, and I was like, "Oh, my mama loved me, she went and got me these glasses." And so I think with my poetry is the same thing. I think I'm really reflective on real life, what's going on. And so I remember one of the first poems that I wrote in college that it was called "I Was Tired,"
yeah. Hey,
and and I remember jumping into a poetry slam in Austin, Texas, right? I had never done that. I jumped into this poetry slam and I competed against people who had been doing poetry for a long time.
yeah,
And I actually tied for third place. I got to perform on stage with Nikki Giovanni at the University of Texas in Austin. And at the time, Dr. Mays and I were dating, and so he told me, he was like, you know, do you realize you have a gift?
mm,
And he said, because everybody can't just write something and then all of a sudden here they are on stage with Nikki Giovanni. And I think for me, that really caught my attention.
yeah,
And so I feel like, a lot of people say God gave you a talent, you better use it, right? And so when it comes to the poetry, it's the same thing. I kind of got to feel it.
mm,
I have to feel what's going on. I know that I like to write down things that I don't always share. I think you
mhm,
probably have experienced that too. You got to do a lot of things that you might not put into the public. So poetry for me, the style I like is freestyle. I
yeah,
don't like to follow a format per se,
mhm,
but it's also the same thing with the books, right? I read it out loud and I read it to see how other people will perceive it.
mm,
I like to read it to somebody and
mm,
share it before I publish something out there
mm,
in the world with the poetry. And I remember one poem in particular. It was called "Sister, Are You Really My Sister?" that I also wrote in college. And I don't know, 7 years later after I wrote that poem, I was gone. I'm way long gone from undergrad. Somebody said, "Hey, my women's group, we read this poem
mm.
and it's your poem." And I
Wow,
thought, that is crazy, right?
yeah, wow,
But that's why I feel like you got to feel it,
yeah,
because if you feel it, then it means something. It means
mhm,
something not just to you but to other people.
yeah,
And for something you wrote to carry on for that long and
Mhm.
in an audience you didn't even intend, you know?
Yeah. Now I look at those poetry slams, and so I
Yeah.
just want to ask: is your style when you come up there like dun dun dun?
So
Do
let
you,
me let me tell you,
yeah.
no, because I thought that I was good, you
Yeah.
know, and I have actually done something similar way back in the day where I had a couple of friends of ours that who did music, you know, and I would read my poetry and they would play
Mhm.
music in the background. I was like, oh, this is good. But then, you know, when you start hearing some of these people freestyle and yeah,
Yeah.
I will admit I am not on that level. I will bow down, and it is. I love it though. Hey, I love to listen to
Yeah.
it. It's very inspirational. It's very encouraging.
Hmm.
And one thing I would say for me as an author, poet, speaker, I love supporting other people. So hey, I feel the more the merrier. But I know my lane, and that poetry slam nowadays with the, you know, it's like when I it seems like when I joined the poetry slam, we were on this level. They have taken it up so
Oh
many
yeah.
notches
Yes.
that hey, I
Yeah.
gracefully bow out of that.
Yeah. And it just come. Yeah. I remember. I don't know if they still do it, but I remember Sunday nights here it was very big. For one poetry club, and they will always have a few things going. But I haven't heard anything about it. It was some guy named Seven or something like that was a poet here that was doing a lot of work. So okay, now thinking about the poetry, the speaking, um, author, the writing. I want to talk about people who are aspiring to do what you're doing. What words do you have for other people who are aspiring to create that meaningful and impactful children's literature?
Well, I would say, you know, do your research. That's one thing I would say.
Mm,
The reason I always tell people that when they're talking about publishing specifically is to do your research. And I will give this example for the children's book specifically because a lot of times that's what I get people wanting to do a children's book is to read a lot of children's book. That when I published my first book, I was reading a lot of children's book
mm,
to my kids.
yeah.
And I say that because I always tell people, well, you want to know what size book do you want? What do you want your book to feel like, to look like?
Mm,
You know, you have hardcover, soft covers, you have, you know, these 6x9s, you have these huge books, you have, you know, jumbo books. So it's just what do you want your finished project to look like? And
yeah,
so that's what I mean by doing research. I mean going in, looking at the covers, looking at the
yeah,
colors, looking at the images. What do you want your image to look like? And I say that from experience
yeah.
because when I published my first book, I wrote it, I handed it over to somebody, and I
Mm,
said, "Here you go." I didn't have any input on the images, on the book design, because I didn't know what I wanted it to look like. I just wanted them to publish it.
mhm,
And when they did it, and I was like, "Oh, yeah, this is great." And in retrospect, I was like, "Oh, you know, my point of view got lost
yeah,
in the images, but the story is so good it doesn't matter, right? Because a
yeah,
good story is a good story.
mhm,
But I wrote My Amazing Dad from the perspective of a daughter and the admiration for her father. And if you look on the cover of that book, it's a boy, his
mhm,
brother, and dad. They took the girl out of it. And so that's why I always say in retrospect to tell authors to really do your research so that you know what you want. You know what your book, you know what you want your book to look like.
yeah. And I don't know if you said it before, but did you self publish after that, or have you started doing that?
So I published, yes, I published through Amazon the first book,
Hmm.
published completely through Amazon, and now I use Ingram and Amazon. So I still self-publish. And I
Hmm.
will say this, I have a good friend of mine named Beth Boland. She's an author. She's a great uh, YA author. And a lot of times I would bounce my books off of her. And I remember when I went to the I Am, the affirmation book, she said, "This I know you usually self-publish, but this book is so good, you need to shop it out and have it traditionally published." And I did. I shopped it out. I submitted queries, and I did try to have it traditionally published. But it was always no. We like the book, but it's not what we're looking for. We like the book, but you know, not quite. So I felt so passionately about the book, about the affirmation book, that I self-published it anyway. And I'm
Hmm.
so glad that I did because that book sells internationally. It sells in Canada. It sells in Japan, and it has won two literary awards. And you know, so I you know, you asked a question about what do you tell people who are aspiring to publish? So, the first thing was do your research, but the other thing is know why you're doing it, right? And with that affirmation book, I knew I wanted to share those affirmations and that biblical connection with other parents, churches, and everybody. And I'm glad I did.
Yeah. Wow. I'm telling you, that's when you just follow your heart and just say this
Yep.
is gonna happen. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I know you kind of didn't want to drop any bombs on us, but I'm gonna just do this one more time before we close this out. You don't have anything in mind for the next publication? Nothing where you could just drop any teasers for us?
So yeah, actually, I had started a project prior to the pandemic, and that I had to kind of put down, and so I want to pick that back up. It is a poetry book, but it's not going to be poetry slam. It's still a children's book,
Yeah.
but it's that I wanted to dedicate this. So when I talk about my purpose, one thing I want to do is dedicate this book to our daughter Austin, and we have all kind of collectively just written some poems or some pieces, and I want to gather all of that up, but I also want to do a little bit of teaching with it too, because I like to encourage our kids to write, right? So it's not just reading. When I go to speak, I want to encourage them to write. So the book will have a few little tips on writing poetry, a few little examples of different poetry styles, and so it's going to teach them that, and maybe encourage them to write their own poems as well. So that's what I have in the works.
Yeah.
And when I get ready to start that and finish, I will definitely let you know.
Yeah. That's and I think starting early. Ms. Robinson brought a young man into the school, and he had a nice little method where he worked students from a thought, getting it out of the thought onto the paper, and before they knew it, everybody left with their own poem about themselves, And so, like I say, something like that is so needed, just getting them started, because a few of them I could tell something came on, at
Mhm.
least three of them, and so then what happens if they caught that earlier? Where would
Yeah.
they be? An expression.
Oh yeah, I remember doing a couple of workshops with kids. It's always amazing when
Mm,
depending on what kind of workshop I do. Sometimes if we have enough time, like you said, going through the process of brainstorming, and then your first draft, and having the kids present that, because I want to have them be encouraged to read, be encouraged to write, but also be
mm,
encouraged to speak, because that's important, right? In almost any field that you have, you need to be able to communicate. And so when these kids present what they wrote in that hour session, or that 45 minutes or whatever, sometimes I'm blown away
yeah.
by what they write.
Hmm. Yeah.
And
I'm telling you. That's how it was with me in third grade. Don't sleep on me, people. That's all good. Well, I guess as we get ready to land this plane, tell us, where can we find the books? If we want to do speaking, if we want to bring you in, how do we get in contact with you? All the good stuff, Miss Megan.
Hey, everything is on belindamays.com. So that's my website. I have pretty much everything out there, even books and gifts, and things like that. Because I also started doing some of the gifts to go along with the books packages. Reach out to me. I'm on social media at Belinda Nichelle. That's BelindaNechelle on all the social media platforms. It's consistent throughout of them.
Hey,
So you can reach me on all social media or belindamays.com.
hey, that's it. Keep it simple.
Yeah,
Do
that's it.
hey. All right. Well, once again, thank you. We're going to close out the season. We will be back in July,
All
sometime in
right.
July. I'll start working my way toward that way. Right now, it's time to rest.
There you go. Rest and have
Hey,
some fun. Enjoy the sun, enjoy the water.
hey, well, I told you we got the birthday coming up. For the cancers in the
Yeah.
building, they coming up soon. We're gonna let y'all get y'all shine on right now.
We have a cancer in our family too. So hey,
Hey, there we go then. All right.
Yeah.
Well, once again, I say thank you, Ms. Mays, for coming on. I look forward to getting this out, sharing with the community.
Awesome. Thank you for having me. I've
All right.
enjoyed it.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, y'all, for the season finale. I'll see y'all in July. This is KT for KTTV signing out. 100.
This is Darnell with Broadcast Houston.
This is Dr. Tamara Beckford.
Hey, this is Candace.
This is London Underwood.
This is Kirsten Bass with Inner City Greens, and you're watching.
Y'all are now tuned in to
KTTV.
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 K